Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Hello, welcome back. Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to today's Daf Yomi, CHULLIN Daf Yud Beis. We are holding 4 lines off the top of the Amud. Amar of Nachman in the name of Amar Rab. So you see this person doing shechita. He's not a noted sheichet. Ra echad sheshachat. So you observe this person doing shechita. What's the status of that animal? What's the status of that meat? It depends. Imra'u. If he had been observing him all throughout the process, from beginning to the end, mitchila v'atzoy, then you can eat it. Mutar la'echol mishchitasa, you can rely on the shechita. Bimla, but otherwise, if you haven't been monitoring the act of shechita, you never know. Asur la'echol mishchitasa, you cannot eat that meat. Asks the Gemara, what type of sheichet, what are his credentials? Hechidami, what are we talking about? Idi yada, if he knows that his sheichet, the gomer, was a knowledgeable fellow, a learned fellow, familiar with the halachos of shechita, lamali ra. So why does he have to observe him? If he's an expert, then he's an expert. Just rely on him. V'idi yada loy gomer. And if he happens to know that that fellow was not one who knows halachos of shechita, then pshita, then obviously this halacha would hold true. Because if you haven't seen him, you never know what he did. You can't rely on it. If you observed and you saw everything was okay, then you're good. What's Rav's point here? Must be somewhere in between. Velo de lo yada. He doesn't know whether that person is in fact an expert or not. Igomer, ilai gomer. He doesn't know whether the person is knowledgeable in hilchos shechita or not. So in that case, Rav teaches us you can't just assume the best. You have to actually know firsthand that he did a proper shechita. Ask the Gemara, Lema, Roiv, why do you have to observe him? The fact is, that person stepped up to the plate. He did shechita. Let's assume, Lema, let's suggest that Roiv Mitzuyin, most people, most likely, a person who is found Eitzel shechita, a person who steps up to do shechita, mumchenein, are experts. Why would he do it otherwise? We find a similar brisa with this concept that if a person does shechita, you can assume that he knows what he's doing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten involved. Okay, this fellow found a shechted chicken in the street. Has no clue who did the shechita. Another case, Reuben asks his friend Shimon, "Be my agent. Go ahead and say ushchait. Go do shechita on my chicken." And then he goes out and he finds a shechted chicken. He's not sure who did it. The fellow never came back to report, so he finds his chicken shechted. We assume it was shechted properly. In both cases, if it appears to have been slaughtered, we assume it was done properly by an able person. Alma, apparently, Amrina, we apply the rule that Roiv Mitzuyin, Eita Shechita Mumchene. Most likely a person who is involved in Shechita is a Mumche. He's an expert. Achanami, so here as well, but in our case, when you observe that person doing Shechita, we should also apply the same concept. Lema, we shall say, Roiv Mitzuyin, Eita Shechita Mumchene. What do you have to sit and watch him? The answer is like this. Certainly we're speaking that that person who executed the Shechita was not a mumcha, was not a knowledgeable person. So perhaps he lucked out. Ukigain, the shachat kamon chatzim, shaper. And what happened was that you did take note of the first simon, right? You have to shech both simon, the wind and the food pipe. So he did one simon properly. So you would think, okay, this fellow must know what he's doing. Perhaps you can think, midahai, since this simon shaper was done properly, hachnami shaper. Let's assume the second one, which was done behind our back, without our monitoring, was also done properly. You see, he's an expert. You see, he has the ability. Kamashwan, no. You cannot assume anything. Why? The first part, Isramuye, Isramule. He could have just lucked out on it. He could have gotten lucky and done a good job. But since he doesn't really understand the concepts, idach, the other part of the shechita, shema darsha, perhaps he failed, perhaps he delayed, he pressed too hard, you never know. So again, if you know the sheikh is a knowledgeable fellow, you're good. If you know he's not, then you have to observe him. And even though we see that he did the first one properly, you can't just assume anything. But in the middle case, we don't know, we assume. Most likely, Roiv. Mitzuyin, Eitzel Shechita Mumchene. Boy Minei Rav Dimi Bar Yosef, he asked the question of Rav Nachman. Reuben asks his friend Shimon, his shliach, say, please go do my shechita for me. And the owner goes outside and sees his animal shechted. Maho, what's the halacha here? Can he assume that in fact his friend did the shechita, or perhaps somebody else overheard and quickly sees the opportunity to practice his shechita skills? Maybe it wasn't done properly. He said, yeah, certainly it was okay. We assume it's properly shechted. That's case one. Here comes story two. Reuben asks Shimon, his friend, say it's Roim. I have a wheat over there that requires truma to be separated. Can you do it for me? And Shimon never came back to report. So now Reuben is in the dark. Was it done or not? And he goes out and he checks and he says, yeah, hey look, the truma was separated. Mai. What's the halach in this case? In this case, Rav Nachman responds in the negative. We don't assume it was done properly. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? What's the difference? By shechita, you assume he carried out his mission. By truma, we're unsure. Manasha, how do you explain this? Is there an assumption that shliach, an agent, who was appointed to do a job, and he accepted that appointment, he accepted that mission? We assume he'll carry it out. Why else would he have accepted it if he's not planning? So then, just as we assume the shliach did it by the shechita, the same by the truma, for the truma nami. And v'yein chazaka shliach ois shlichusa, we can't assume that a shliach carries out his mission. I feel shechita nami, so the same would apply to the shechita. How could you assume by one and not by the other? Amalei, he says jokingly, this is the chiseichel, when you measure up for me, Allah kur de milcha, a kur, usual amount of salt. Some learn it means one who will eat. In any case, he sort of joked at him. He says, the difference is so clear. Lo olam ein chazaka shliach oiseh shlichos. You never know if the shliach actually implemented his job. So what's the difference between shechita, where we assume for the best, and truma we don't? Or shechita, because by shechita, look, either way, whether he did it or another person stepped up and volunteered to do it, either way we assume, right? Roiv mitzuyin eitza shechita mumcheneh. We assume if you did it, you're good, and it's a successful shechita. Inami dilma in a shama. Even if somebody else overheard your instruction and jumped into the fray and practiced his shechita skills on your animal, ba'azav hashachat. Roiv mitzuyin is still eitza shechita mumcheneh. We will assume that it was done properly. So that's why by shechita you're safe either way. Either Shimon did it or a stranger who knows what he's doing. But by truma, the truma has to be separated by the owner only, or an appointed agent. You can't just volunteer and step in and do somebody's truma. It doesn't work. So there you're in trouble. There you don't know who did it. You can't rely on it. Truma, by the case of truma, it's different. Dilma, there's a concern in shachrin shama. Perhaps another person overheard your instructions. Vazal Tarma, I did the truma on your behalf in an unauthorized fashion. That's a case where you did truma without permission from the owner, and it doesn't work. If one does truma without permission, truma doesn't work. Okay, so we're working with the concept that shliach is oiseh shlichusai, or even ein shlichusai. But by shechita, you're safe either way, whether Shimon did it or a stranger. It was done properly. Because roiv amumchen, by truma, unless you can ascertain that it was the shliach, you can't rely on it. Okay, lema, shall we assume that roiv mitzuyin esher shechita mumchenein, this concept that we're espousing, is perhaps subject to dispute? Tanoi. Some hold of it, some don't. We have a brayse at the Sanya. In this case, he lost his herd, he lost his goats and or his chickens. He's looking around and he finds them, but they're post shechita. Question is, are they kosher or not? Who shechted them? Rabbi Yehuda Oyser says you can't eat it. You never know. Maybe it was a failed shechita. Maybe it's really a carcass, an avela, and you can't eat it. However, Rabbi Chanina Bunoi, the son of Shabbi Yitzhak Lili, he says it's okay, matir, because we assume whoever did the shechita did it properly. Now, before we get into this, let's just conclude the brisa with an elaboration presented by Rebbe. Rebbe wants to explain to us, sort of frame for us the context of this machlekes. Meaning, fine, he lost his animals, he found them shechted, but under what circumstances did he find them? Which setting? Where were they? In a public garbage dump where they dumped the carcasses? Was it in somebody's house? Was it in an enclosed room, guarded like kosher meat? Was it sort of in between, in the kitchen, little green bin, little garbage there, where perhaps it can indicate kashrus, it can indicate that it's not kosher? So we have three possible scenarios, scenes, which could have unfolded. Amar Rebbe, Nirin Divrei Rebbe Yehuda. I side with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. I accept that stringent view. Shematzim ba'ashba, where it was found in the garbage dump. We assume the person who shechted knows it was a failed shechita, threw it away, so you can't eat it. However, v'divrei Reb Chanina b'noi shel Rabbi Yisrael, I accept the opposing shita, the lenient view that allows you to eat it. Shematzim ba'bayis, when it was found in a room, in an enclosed guarded area. Okay, now regarding our discussion, my love, let's assume. What's the machlekes about? Rabbi Yehuda says asur, Reb Chanina says mutter, b'akamiflik, perhaps the machlekes revolves around our point. Whether we can make assumptions about the credentials and abilities of the sheikhet. The Mara Savar, Reb Chanina, the lenient position holds. Masavar Amrinan, Reiv Metzuyin, it's a shchita mumchine. We assume the one who shechted is a mumcha. Mumchine. Omar Savar, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. We don't necessarily say Lo Amrinan, Reiv Metzuyin, it's a shchita mumchine. So it would seem that our concept is really subject to machlekes tanoim. Amar Rav Nachman, but Yitzchak, no, you don't have to go that far. The Kuli Yama, perhaps everybody agrees. Yes, Roiv Metzuyin Eitz Shchita Mumchine. So what's the machlekes about? In concept, they all agree. But here, it's a practical question. It depends where it was found, which would be indicative of its status. It's a totally new discussion. So again, we have three possible setups. A house, a room, it's certainly okay. Public garbage dump, it certainly indicates that it's forbidden. It's an avela, that's why it was thrown away. But somewhere in the middle, that's the point of machlekes. It's a very subtle machlekes. How to view that middle gray area? If it's in a house, if it's in a room, everybody agrees it's okay because it presents like kosher meat. On the other end, on the other extreme side of the spectrum, we have ba'ashba out in the public garbage dump, shebeshuk. Everybody agrees it's asr because it's certainly an avela. What's it doing in the public garbage dump? The machlekes revolves around a middle type of state. Ba'ashba, it's in the garbage bin, but in the kitchen. Shebabayis. Marsava, one holds Adam asr lahatol nevelase ba'ashba shebabayis. Rabbi Yehuda, who takes the strict approach, says, what's it doing in the garbage in your house? A person typically throws his nevela into that local garbage bin in the kitchen. So you assume it's asr. Mar Savar. The other shita says no. Ein adam asr lahatel nevelase ba'ashab shebabayis. You have a real nevela, you throw it out in the garbage. You don't leave it in the kitchen. Apparently it's kosher meat. Apparently the person who shechted it knew it was kosher and kept it in the house. Now you'll ask, how did it get into the green bin, into the garbage? Maybe a child pulled. Maybe it somehow ended up there inadvertently, but it wasn't really indicative of its status. Amar. Okay, let's just go back for another moment to review Rebbe's sort of compromise or elaboration on the machlekes. Amar Rebbe, Nirin Divrei Rabbi Yehuda Shematzam ba'ashba. I adopt Rabbi Yehuda's strict approach when it was in the garbage. Now, what type of garbage? My ashba. What type? Public or private? Ilam ashba shebeshuk, public garbage. You just told me there's no machlek. There's nothing to side with. No shita to adopt here. It's not subject to machlek. All agree it's asr. What's the point of sort of taking sides? You just told me the kuli amalei pligi the asr. Everybody agrees it's asr. It's in the garbage. Elalav shita bashva shebabayis. Apparently, Rebbe is referring to that middle case, which in fact is subject to machlekes, and he sided with the strict approach. Again, we're talking about the garbage bin in the kitchen. Okay. So again, according to this explanation, Rebbe adopted the strict Rabbi Yehuda's view regarding this sort of in-between stage, ashpa in the kitchen. Let's move on to the next part of the brisa, where he seems to be saying exactly the opposite. He adopts the lenient approach in this type of scenario. I agree with the lenient approach. If we found it in the house. Now, my bias, where, which house, what are you talking about? If found it in the fridge, in the house. Ha'amras, again, there's no point in siding and deciding here between different opinions. There is no machlekes. Ha'amras, you just told me, the kuliyam all agree, there's no machlekes. The shara, it's okay if it's in the fridge. Apparently when he said bais, he meant the garbage bin in the kitchen. And here he's taking a lenient approach, in contrast to the strict approach that he took a minute ago. That's a contradiction. Kasher, the Rebbe have a steer with the Rebbe himself. We turn to Talmud base. Hachigama, you're right. He wasn't siding with any opinion. He wasn't ruling like any shita. He was merely explaining to us what the machlekes is about. Hachigama. He meant like this. Nirin divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda's strict approach is accepted by Rabbi Chanina. There is no discussion on that. Le Rabbi Chanina b'nai shel Rabbi Saglili ba'ashvash b'shuk. In a case where it's sitting out in the garbage dump, even Rabbi Chanina would adopt Rabbi Yehuda's strict approach, meaning there's no machlekes there. Shaf Rabbi Chanina b'nai shel Rabbi Saglili, he never argued on that case. He only argued on the case of the green bin in the kitchen. El ba'ashvash b'bayis. But if it's out in the public garbage dump, all agree. It's an extreme case, of course. Moidili agrees to him that it's asa. Venir and v'chula, and then there's a girsa going the other way as well. That Rabbi Chanina's lenient approach is perfectly acceptable to Rabbi Yehuda if it's sitting in the fridge, because he only argued on the case when it's in the garbage in the kitchen. Okay, so he wasn't really paskin like any shita here. He was just clarifying for us the context of the machlekes. So again, we have three possible settings where you could have found the surprisingly the surprise find of the shechted animal in the bias, in the fridge, in the public garbage dump, or somewhere in between in the garbage bin in the kitchen. Fridge certainly is okay. Why? We're assuming roiv mitzuyin eitz ashich the mumchen hein is shechted was shechted properly. Garbage dump indicates that it's users. Nevela, dead, an animal with a failed shchita. That's why it's there. If it's somewhere in the middle, 3 men in the house, that's the machlek. Chutz mecheresh sheita v'katan, the Mishnah says, don't allow a cheresh, deaf mute, a deranged person, a katan, a minor, to do shchita. Shemi kakol shchitas, they might ruin the shchita. Now the Mishnah began with hakol shchita. Anybody can do it, and it works. So if it's done, it works, except for these fellows. The Mishnah should have really adopted a past tense as well, even by the Eved. These fellows are not reliable. Why does the Mishnah use a future tense? Shema yikalkul, they will ruin it. Shema kilkulu like Tani, rather than saying kilkulu, they may have ruined it, you can't rely on it even after the fact. It doesn't say like Tani, Ela Shema yikalkul, it says they will. They're slated for that. They're liable for that. What's the message of the Mishnah? Amarava. Zois Emeres, we learn from this Mishnah. It's a step further. Ein meisrin lehen chulin chatchila. You shouldn't give them chulin, regular animals to do shchita, even under supervision. Although the Mishnah concluded that if they did it under supervision, it works. But the Mishnah here is highlighting this point. Don't submit yourself to this type of procedure. Don't give the cheresh or the shoyte v'katan an animal, even under supervision, because you never know. They're liable to ruin things. It's going to be about tashkes. You might run into issue. However, ultimately, all these fellows, even the katan who did shchita, and others are observing, meaning they're under supervision. If it was monitored and it was confirmed to be okay, you can eat it. Now, there's another point. Intention. The Chachamim hold that a person, when he does shchita, he has to have kavanah. I'm shechting an animal. Whereas Rabbi Nassim, we'll see in a minute, does not require kavanah. As long as it was done by way of a person, kayach gavra, energy coming from a person, that's okay, even without kavanah, even without intent for shchita. Which is pretty much what's happening here. You have a katan who doesn't have that, hasn't really achieved, the legal status of intelligence, so to speak, right? He doesn't have the das to generate, to affect halacha with his mind, with his kavanah. His mind isn't mature enough, isn't developed enough to achieve through kavanah, through machshava. So it's as if there was no kavanah. Yeah, action he can do, he did. He shechted the animal, but there was no kavanah. There was no legally valid intent here. So how do we allow the shchita done by the katan or the cheresh or the shoyte? Mantana the loibo in the kavanah shchita. Who's the opinion that does not require kavanah by shchita? Amarava, that's Rabbi Nasani. The stani oishia, Zeira, the small oishia, the smaller Rabbi Oishia, as opposed to the older Rabbi Oishia. Zeira the ben Chabrai, the youngest amongst the colleagues, amongst the talmidim. He says, look, zorak sakin, fellow picks up a knife. He's doing a target practice against the watch. throwing it against the wall. And lo and behold, there's a bird that happened to fly by, and the bird got shechted through his flying knife. So it was done by way of the kayach of a person, right? It wasn't just a machine, it was a person, but it wasn't without intent. He was trying to poke it into the wall and ended up slicing through the bird's, Rabbi Nassan Machshir, he says it's okay. No, Paislan, they don't allow it. Hu Tanila, Rabbi Eshe, who presented this price, he presented it, and he also explained, by the way, Omar law, Halach Rabbi Nassan, we pass Rabbi Nassan, that has to be done by a human, but it doesn't have to have kavanah. That's how the Mishnah follows as well. Ask the Gemara one more question about being moilechu maybe. Unless you have a real long knife, it's just a small knife, you have to go back and forth. The shechita has to be to and fro. Right? So here, the knife was flying in one direction, and did shechita just by going in one direction. How's that enough? Rashi explains, unless the length of the knife is double the size of the neck, in which case you can just go one way and you have enough material to actually cut properly. But if it's a smaller, shorter knife, you have to go two ways. Says the Gemara, you're right, it went two ways. Shalcha, it went that way, ubo, and returned by bouncing off the wall, kedarka, on its route, meaning it shot at the wall, sliced partially going that way, then it bounced against the wall, came back, and completed the shechita on its way back. Okay, Rabbi Yechon had an interesting question. We're talking about the Kaddan's ability or inability to generate a proper, halachically valid machshava. So he had this very question: Katan yesh le machshava or yesh le machshava? Rashi explains. Suppose he's shechting not a regular animal, he's shechting a korban, where we need real kavanah, we need lishma, intent, for the sake of the oila or the shlam, whatever he's doing. So a cotton does the shechita. Yesh le machshava, ein le machshava. Does it qualify as lishma? Does his intent count? Or not? Yes or no? Yesh le machshava, ein le machshava. Amalei Rabbi Ami. Rabbi Ami asked the one who quoted this, Rabbi Yechon, he says, I don't understand why you're climbing all the way up to machshava. Why don't you ask the same regarding why don't you ask a more basic question? But to Boyle Maisa, Rabbi Yechon could have presented the same dilemma regarding an act, a physical act performed by a katan. And Rashi explains like this. We know that an oila, korban oila, has to be shechted on the north of the Azara, in the tzafon. So you see the katan dragging an animal from the south, where it's not appropriate for the oila to be shechted, over to the north and doing the shechita there. So, and he's actually explaining. He says, "Look, I'm bringing it there to do the oila because I know that it's not kosher on that side." So in this case, aside from the machshava, you have an act which is indicative of the machshava. You have a physical act, dragging the animal to the other side, which supports the machshava. It's a physical manifestation of that intent, which in a way is better than just strictly intent. There's a physical act to sort of back it up, to confirm that in fact that's what he has in mind. So firstly, we could have asked about this. I mean, that's a more basic question, does it work or not? And then you go into the next case, the more complicated, the more subtle case. So I'll answer the question. Why did Rabbi Yechon not discuss this type of case of Maaseh? Because he knows it works. There's a Mishnah that it works. It's not a Mishnah. Yesh lein Maaseh. A cotton, a cheresh, right? They have the ability to affect by way of physical actions. So you know this case is okay? Well, in that same Mishnah, by the way, it rules out machshava. It says they don't have strict machshava. Machshava on its own doesn't work by the cotton. Machshava nami l'tibay. So then he shouldn't, if he knew the Mishnah, which of course he did, he should not have questioned whether they have machshava, because both halachas are contained in that same Mishnah. Maaseh, yeah, machshava, no. This now we have a Mishnah, Eilen machshava, right? We have the Mishnah which says that they don't have the ability to affect by way of just intent and thought. This now we have a Mishnah, ha'aloin, right? So again, this nan. Why did he not discuss Maaseh? Because the Mishnah says they do have Maaseh. Machshava nami l'tibay, and they shouldn't be asking a machshava. This nan eilen machshava. They don't have machshava. This now we have a Mishnah. Alan v'ariman v'egos. Alan is a walnut, Varim is a pomegranate, Ego is a nut. Shechakakum tinoika. The kids hollow them out in order to use them, to play with their sand, lamud ben offer, to measure offer, so it makes it into a kli, by way of a physical maaseh, an act, which is clear cut for the sake of making it a kli, right? We see it, they're talking about it. Or they fix them up, they board out these things in order to make them into containers for the scale. In any case, it was a maisa that's clearly indicative of this intent. Tamein, they're considered kalim, they're makabel tumah, susceptible to tumah. Why? Because these children, despite their early age, despite their lack of maturity in terms of their intellect, but actions are actions, right? He did a masa, which is clearly with this purpose. It makes it a clear. We'll continue to Yud Gimel and Aleph. Ve'ele machshava. But let's say it's just a matter of machshava, mental designation. So suppose there's a kli sitting there. There's a shell of an egg, of a nut, and they designated it. Okay, they labeled it. This is going to be for the to be used to play with the sand. So there was no physical expression to that intent. It was just merely mental. That they can't do. Ve'ele machshava. These children don't have the ability to affect by way of just merely machshava. So that was his question. Why are we discussing whether they have machshava and not whether they have masa? Because there's a Mishnah that says they don't have machshava. Well, guess what? That same Mishnah says they have masa. What's going on? We have a Mishnah. Amrali says, you're right. There's a third step right in the middle. It's 1, 2, and 3. 1 is just plain machshava. That they don't have. 3 is an outright, clear-cut masa. That they have the ability to do. I'm talking about something in the middle. Something in between. A physical experience, physical masa, which is somewhat indicative of intent. Not clear-cut. It's sort of arbitrary. You can interpret it both ways. What happens there? Amalei, he says, Machshava Guridos Lakim Boile. Sure, he wasn't asking just about Machshava per se, stage 1. Of course it doesn't work. Kikim Boile, his question was Machshavte, where the child's intent is nikeres, is somewhat visible, indicative, somewhat expressed, Mitech Masa, by way of his action. It's not clear cut, but it's almost. Kigai, for instance. So he's in the Beis HaMikdash, and there is an animal standing on the other side of the Azar, and he drags it over to Tzafin, which is a location for the oila to be processed, but he hasn't expressed it. He didn't announce his intention. We have to infer. You can say, well, certainly he's doing it for the sake of oila. You see it in his action, but perhaps not. Perhaps you just drag him because he didn't like the other corner. That's not a maisa which clearly, unequivocally indicates intent. So perhaps that's not good enough. We have an oila animal standing in Dorim, and he dragged it off to Tzafin, and shechted it there. Shall we say, it is considered having processed with the proper kavanah, with the proper intent for oila, because of the physical act that indicated as such. Again, machshav itself wouldn't do it. He doesn't have the legal powers to do that, to affect by way of his machshav, his thought process. Unless there's a physical act that backs it up, that displays it, that expresses it. But this physical act isn't a clear expression. It could be not. It's not a clear-cut expression. Shall we say that it renders it like a kavana for oila, or you can say makam hu lo yisram ilay. The reason why he dragged it from the other side, he didn't like the way it was crowded there. He didn't like the first place. So his physical act isn't necessarily a clear expression of kavana. Okay, so again, we have 1 which is machshava per se, that doesn't work. 3 which is a clear-cut maaseh, which cannot be interpreted otherwise. That works even by a katan. Although he doesn't have the power to affect by way of his machshava, but his maaseh, which is clear-cut, clearly indicating that works. The question is a maaseh which can be interpreted both ways. Well, Hanami Amra Rabbi Yechon Chadazim, Rabbi Yechon already discussed this elsewhere. and taught us that it works. This non hamale pirosav legag. So now we shift to the halacha of hechsher lekabel tumah, right? If you have produce that got wet, now it's susceptible to becoming tummy. If it's dry as can be, it never got wet, then it's not open for tumah. So a person hauls up his pirosav can mean fruit, can mean wheat, any produce, legag up to the rooftop. What was the purpose? If you to clean them of their bugs, not for the sake of getting wet. V'yorad aleim tal, and then came down the dew, and they got moist. Since it wasn't done with intent, the owner was not interested, was not pleased with this process. There's no halacha b'chiyutan, which is a term the Torah uses to describe produce which got wet by consent of the owner, which makes it open for tumah. In this case, it doesn't apply. But if he was pleased with it, his intent was that it should get wet as well, he was okay with that, then it assumes the status of b'chiyutan, it is now open for tumah. That's if an adult did it. What about if a child or any other individual who doesn't have that legal capacity to affect by way of his intellect? They brought it up, even though they knew it was getting wet, that was part of the plan. It doesn't work. Why? Because they don't have the ability to affect by way of their intent, by way of their intellectual capacity. Yeah, they have the ability to affect by way of physical actions, but machshava of theirs does not impact, does not have results. Hold it. That's only if the child did not go up there and overturn the material to distribute the moisture. So there's no masa to back up the intent. But if you overturn the material to distribute the water throughout, so clearly he's doing a masa for them to get wet, then it has a status of b'chiyutan. Now, this is sort of the in-between type of stage, because, yeah, it appears to us that's his motive. He's trying to get it wet, but he didn't declare it as such. He didn't announce his intentions. It could be for a different reason. It could be his bored. So, nevertheless, we see that according to Rabbi Yechon, that middle stage works. So why, in our Gemara, is he unsure? Yeah, it works, but his question was, to what extent? Is it minat Torah, that a child has that capacity to affect by way of this sort of intermediate action? In which case, we'll apply it even for lenient matters, like, to be machshir that korban, that oila, right? Make it acceptable. Or perhaps it's only the rabbanon. We'll only machmir apply it for strictnesses, like regarding tumah, but not otherwise. Okay, let's just stop for a second before we continue. Perhaps we'll just drop down to the another piece here to sort of to tie up the sugya. Just stop for a second. We have basically a shaila regarding the individuals who don't have that intellectual capacity to affect by way of machshava, but yes, by way of ma'isa. So machshava per se doesn't work. Masa all the way, yes. A masa which sort of can be interpreted both ways, it works, but perhaps only midrabanan. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Masni Hochi, he had a different version of this whole discussion. So again, we're quoting Rabbi Yechon as presenting a shaila, a question. In this version, it was like this: Kotin yesh le masa oile masa. Can a cotton affect by way of his masa? Now, Rashi explains that here we're talking about stage 3, a masa which is clear cut, clearly indicative of this intent. So let's say he brings the animal to the right side of the azora and he announces his intention. It's for the sake of the oil. Does a cotton have that ability or not? Does it become lishma? Is that considered like a shchita for the sake of oila, because it was expressed by those obvious actions? Says the Gemara. So Rami asked, why are we only focusing on any masa? He could have posed a similar question regarding machshava. Let's say it's only machshava, it's not a masa. Rashi says, for instance, he takes a korban, does shchita, and he says it's for the sake of oila. So it's really just intent. The shchita doesn't indicate anything. It's an act, but it doesn't indicate that it's an oila. Or we have to indicate that he's thinking oila because he said so. So that's like a machshava that's being expressed verbally. Does he have that ability or not? Machshava. So why didn't he discuss machshava? Because he knows it doesn't work. Why did Rabbi Yechon not question regarding machshava? Because he knows it doesn't work. The Mishnah says A cotton can't do that. There's none. Eilan machshava. These fellows don't have machshava. So the masa namlik to boile. So why is he asking regarding a masa? If he's doing a masa which is obviously clearly clear cut for this purpose with this intent, why is he asking? We know that it works. It's not. We have that Mishnah. If they form those utensils with the explicit intent for making it into a kli, it works. It's none. Right? It's not yeshlan masa. They have the ability to effect by way of a clear cut, unequivocal act. Says the Gemara, he knew the Mishnah, but he wasn't sure to what extent. What weight do these things carry? This type of masa, which we're calling number 3, the most obvious clear-cut masa, is it only mid the Rabbanon, the Chumrah, or even the Torah? Upashet, and Rabbi Yechon responded and sort of clarified for himself, yep, has full effect. This type of number 3 masa, which is muchach, certainly takes effect even in Torah. On the other end, other side of the other extreme of the spectrum, we have the machshava, which is number 1. Einlan machshava, they don't have that ability to affect through machshava. Even the Rabban, it's worthless. And that sort of in between case, which we call number 2, machshavte, where their intent is nikeres, is indicative miteich masa by way of their action. It's sort of indicative. It's somewhat obvious, but not clear cut. So in this case, we are just machmir medaraisa einlay. The cotton doesn't have the ability to affect through minat Torah. But the Rabban yeshlam, the Rabban will machmer, like in the case of the hechshel kabel tumah, in the case of, right? The Rabban will machmer, we give him that status. Okay, so that's the conclusion, right? We have 3 levels. Just a plain machshava, just plain, intent, which can be expressed through words, but it's just plain intent, which doesn't have a masa as the basis for it. Cotton can't do anything, can't affect anything through that. On the other side, you have the masa, which is muchach, clear-cut masa, which accompany this intent. So that is considered kavana. That's a physical expression of his intent that works. Whereas if it's in the middle, it's a maisa, which is accompanying the kavana, which isn't necessarily there, which is just a sort of an assumption. And then we say midaraisa, no, midrabban, yes. One more line. One more piece. Karbanos are different than non-karbanos regarding shchita as well. Even according to Rav Nassan, who says that by chulin shchita you don't have to have kavana, but it has to be done by way of human energy, right? But doesn't have to have kavanah for the actual act of shchita. Whereas, so basically, according to even Rav Nassan, by chulin, as long as it was done by way of a human act, it works. But by kachim, it doesn't work. Menaylim is asak b'kachim shu pasal. He's preoccupied. He's shooting darts. If he's not machavan for the sake of an act of shchita, it's pasal. How do we know that? Shnei b'shachad has been a bakar. As Ben Bakr says, he has to have kavanah for the shchita of a bakar. Shtel shem ben bakar, he has to have kavanah to do shchita. Right? We know it's a Ben Bakr. The shachad that's Ben Bakr is telling you it has to be intent for the sake of shchita. He has to know shechting. Shchita shem ben bakar. Amar Lois, he responded. He says, "Yeah, I knew that. Zubi yadeinu. We knew that. Yadeinu. We know that. You're supposed to have kavanah for shchita. I want to know if it's essential, if it's critical. How do we know that's critical? Now, the absence of that intent disqualifies the carbon. Amar Lei says we have another possible. It's Soinchem. Tizbachu, which teaches us it's not enough. That it was done by a person. You have to have kavan l'shem shchita l'datchem zvoichu. Do the shchita l'datchem with intent. That's the only way the carbon is kosher. Okay. All the best to you and hatzlacha.